Welcome to this live. I'm so freaking excited to welcome a special guest on today to have the juiciest conversation. This is going to help so many people, especially all the business owners, female entrepreneurs, whether you're early, whether you're late in business, well, not late, but more advanced, and you've built an established business. It's one thing to be good at making money. It's a very different skill and habit to be good at keeping money. And so my special guest today is Anna. I'm going to bring her on. Financial freedom and building true generational wealth. So let me bring her up. Here she is.
Hi.
Hi, Anna. How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm good, thank you.
Good.
You're in Australia?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I forgot how weird the live on Instagram is, that it's like you're above me and I'm below, and then like the screen is weird. So that's all good.
Yeah. No, initially I put it on and my tripod dropped, and it just like, I was like, oh, hang on, let me just lift you back up. Good to see you.
Yeah.
We've got Australia and Bali on the call. I know UK, Europe, we're waking up and just getting into things about now. But I'm excited to be sharing, to get into this juicy topic and share so much wisdom with people who, whether they're more advanced in business or earlier on in business, this is like such valuable stuff that I know more people want to be able to know, want to be able to really understand and implement into their daily, monthly, annual practice. So, whoop, whoop. So, for all of my people, do you want to introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about you, who you are, what you do, how you help people.
Yeah, of course. Can you hear me okay? I've got this like new fluffy microphone I'm obsessed with, but I don't know if it's working, but you can hear me, okay? Okay. Perfect. So yeah, my name is Anna and I'm the founder of She's So Money, and it's really a financial education and coaching company, and I founded it 3 years ago now because of my own experience with money. I made a lot and basically spent it all and had nothing to show for it. So I really just went through this like whole journey of realizing that women don't talk about this. We don't get taught how to be good with money. And there's just such a big gap between, like, obviously we want women to make more and more money, and we're making more money than ever in history, which is amazing, but there's still a really big wealth gap. With men having way more like net worth than women. And we're just not, especially as women, we're kind of told that we're shit with money and we're bad with money, and we don't have these conversations. So it was really like my own personal experience. I was like, this is what I want to do. Like, this is my passion and what I want to do with my life.
Amazing. Awesome. Well, I'm excited to dive into the topics today. And if you're from Anna's audience, hi, I'm Sarah. I'm a sales and business coach. And so I come in at that sort of first stage to help you make more money in the business. But there's this later stage of how do you keep it? How do you manage it? What do you do with it once you've made it, so that you're not just in this like, woohoo, I made loads of money, let me just like free for all. Because simply knowing how to make money and the skill of sales, signing clients and bringing money in is only part of the story. And this is why, like, we can see celebrities make hundreds, thousands, and even millions and still go bankrupt, because simply knowing how to make money is not the be all and end all of it. You can be really successful at making it, but if you haven't got either people, systems, or methods, which we'll get into today, set up, you can still go broke after making a fuck ton. We see it, so I'm excited to dive into this.
We're a bit of a dream team, because obviously for my audience, we'll probably do a live like on my page as well, but like for my audience, if you want to make more money and make more sales, then here's your girl for that. So
well, we'll post it. I'll add you as a collaborator so that we can like do it, but I'm sure we'll do more in the future as well. But yeah, let's dive in. Okay. I'd love to hear, because you touched on it in your intro, your story. You said that you'd made a lot and then like you lost it all. What were some things that were either like part of that either like habits, or maybe it was like a frivolous mindset, or just like a love for shop? What were the things that like caused that to happen, and then the realizations that you had because of it?
Yeah, for sure. So I think obviously, you know, a lot of it is like looking back in retrospect of what was going on. And it's normally always going to be like primarily like an identity gap and a mindset thing, but also a knowledge gap.
Mm.
However, I think more and more, like the more work I've done, I've realized that I used to kind of blame the knowledge gap a lot. So it was like, well, I didn't do anything because I didn't know how to, or I didn't know, you know, it was important. And I think that is more true for like the investing side of things. Like I do teach and talk about investing as like a very important part, obviously, of wealth creation. And, you know, for me, I just didn't really, I mean, I knew about it, but I thought that the stock market, for example, was like gambling, and it was really dangerous, and, you know, it wasn't for people like me. But in terms of like actually managing your money and like saving your money and stacking money up, which are two very, very also massively important parts of wealth creation, I knew I was supposed to do that. Like, I think we can all kind of admit that even if we're saying like I'm bad with money, or like I'm struggling with money, like we all kind of on some level know that yeah, we should be looking at our money, and you know, we should be saving. But I think that the key word there is should. So it's this sense of like, you know, anything where you say you should do something is always going to be met with resistance, because it's like this sense of obligation. It's not really driven by like an internal factor that like you really want to do that. So I think for me, you know, I was stuck. I was, you know, I'd never earned more than like £800 a month. Like I don't know where your audience is primarily. Like obviously we're both English, like living over here, but you know, the most I'd ever earned was 800 quid a month. So it's like $1,000 a month. And when I started making money in my first business, I was operating from that person who made £800 a month, where, yeah, I didn't really manage my money, but also there wasn't a lot to manage, you know. And whilst it is important to manage your money at any level, if you're just living like just making enough to pay the bills, then it's like that's what, you know, that's what's happening. So I was still operating out of this kind of broke person mindset and like broke person habits, because that's all I'd ever known. So when I started making a lot of money, I was just like, you know, pig and shit. I was just like, this is great. Like I can spend all this money, and I just, yeah, buried my head in it completely. But all of those habits, like I bought over to the higher earning version of me. So I didn't manage my money. I would actually still overspend, because when you make more money and you're not tracking it, you just naturally just expand your spending. And that's why people often feel like, where the hell did, you know, my money go? I remember once I was like sat on the floor with my sister, like when I finally started to kind of try and like manage my money. And I turned to her, I was like, I spent £13,000 last month. And she was like, what? And I was like, I don't know. And it was like such this like, oh my God, like £13,000. You know, I didn't really have any idea where it had gone. So I think it really is this sense of like, you know, and I'm not saying this is conscious for everyone as well. I think that's really important to know. And I don't want people to feel like shame, because I know like a lot of women experience shame with this, but you know, I guess like I just didn't know any better, but I was aware that, you know, it would be better and beneficial for me to manage my money and save, but I didn't have a like real motivation, because I don't think I really understood how important it is, and I don't think I really understood like how important it is for wealth creation. So I think that was like more for me, but you know, people are very different, and some people come in and they're like, it's very clear it's a mindset and an identity issue, like I'm trying to save but it's not happening, and like, or when they do go and try and manage their money, they have a really like visceral reaction, like anxiety, trembling, like, you know, I think it's just important to note that like money is such an emotional topic. Like it's got to be up there with
100.
death and like love, and like, you know, it's this, and everything you're like picking up when you're younger, it just makes such a like emotional impact. And when we're adults, you know, and you know, like we don't get taught this shit in school, so you get thrown out into the world. It's like, there you go, like go pay your taxes and like, you know, invest in your pension, and you're like, what?
Yeah.
And so it's very complex, I think, but it's always kind of whittled down to an identity gap and a knowledge gap. But the identity gap very much drives the knowledge gap, because we can be aware that we, like I say, should be saving or should be managing our money better, and we have that awareness, but then that identity gap stops us from seeking out the knowledge.
Yeah. I super like love what you were sharing there, because it's so true about it being emotional. There's like a few different things that I wanted to pick up on then.
Yes.
One is the emotional side of it, because that doesn't stop, even if whether you're a low earner, whether you're a high earner, we're still very emotional around money, because money is how we exchange energy in the society we live in. Yeah. So with it being transactional and it being this thing that we share, of course there's a high amount of emotion and us wanting things to be fair or equal, so that we're always getting what we think is of value. And so, yeah, that still applies even for people who are high earners. And so everything is emotionally driven. And I saw that. I read the book, The Psychology of Money.
Yeah.
And that book was really, really helpful for saying, like, you know, we've always tracked money as if it's black and white and it's measurable and it's this or it's not. And actually history is never... You know, we're tracking the stock market, but the stock market was based on people's emotions. Yeah. It's based on, you know, the brokers who have got their own family to feed, or who are driven by their own impulses or their own stressors or whatever's going on in their own life. And we're driven by what Wall Street says is factual, but it's not factual, it's emotional. And I was like, oh my God. That was a really big light bulb moment from that book, of being like, you know, we're basing this thing as if it's the law, and actually everybody's just human and everybody's just doing what they think is right in the moment. And I was like, okay.
yeah, it's so true. And I think, like with the stock market, for example, that is one of the things that drives the ups and downs of it, but it's not what drives it in the long term. But the problem is that people get scared by it, because those, like, it's very volatile and it goes up and down, because people are buying and selling, and that is driven by emotion. That, you know, like obviously what's happened recently with Trump and the tariffs and everything, that's caused like a really big dip in the stock market, and that was caused by fear. And there's actually a fear and greed index for the stock market, so you can go and have a look. I think it's on CNN. Yeah. And so you can see where like but you know, over the long run, like if you follow like the greats like Warren Buffett, he'll always say like, be greedy when others are fearful. You know, fearful when others are greedy. And it's, you know, that long term like view you have to have. But like 100%, like I think we, you know, I have worked with like financial advisors in the past, like, and no financial advisors, and yeah, even for them, like it's I've even had financial advisors that I've had calls with that are like, I'm a financial advisor and I don't look after my money. Like the true story. So, you know, everyone is like, yeah, it's 100% emotional. It's like pretty much just an illusion. Like, yeah.
Shows, isn't it, that even the ones who have the expertise they're doing do as I say, not as I do.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Because it's just there's fear, there's like worry, like, and like you said, you know, there's multimillionaires and who are still worried about money. And there was a study done that showed that most billionaires, or they interviewed a load of male billionaires, because most of them are male, and one of the biggest, if not the biggest driving, well, can you guess what one of the biggest driving forces of their success?
It was that they never wanted themselves or their family to experience the poverty that they grew up in.
Close.
Okay.
And that probably is one of the big ones, but it was just proving their dad wrong. Just like, fuck you, dad.
Oh my
God. So, you know, it's kind of like, you know, and that's obviously, you know, for a billionaire, I mean, it's not about the money anymore on any kind of level.
Yeah.
Which I think is an
That is
important lesson for us all.
hilarious. That shows how much of an emotional driver it is, because that's the biggest fuck you at
Yeah,
the highest level. Wow.
I know. Funny.
That is so funny. God, we're all just like people with families and relationships and arguments and disagreements and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
I love that. There was something that you mentioned before where you were talking about like the habits that you need to shift, because even when you make money, if you've still got broke habits, the same things will keep on happening. And it made me think of, I think it was around the time in COVID, but do you remember when there was all this advice, especially to millennials, that it was like you need to stop buying lattes and having avocado on toast, and that's why you're broke and can't afford a house.
Yeah, yeah.
And all the millennials are like, bitch, please. So, like, there was that sort of negative messaging that we need to cut out all the things that we enjoy in order to have money. But on the flip side of that, I do also think that whether you're a low earner or a high earner, getting into the habit, even if it's incremental things occasionally, getting into the habit of putting bits aside is that shift of habits. So even if it is just the amount of a latte occasionally, it's more the process and like the mindset shift, the identity shift that you're talking about, of thinking like, I'm putting this aside for future me.
Yeah, 100%. It's, I think the best way I've kind of looked at it, and what I like teach people is with wealth creation, you want to focus on the like £100,000 or dollar decisions, not the $10 decision. So, for example, stopping buying lattes is never going to make you rich. Because, you know, and I have a lot of clients, and understandably people that I work with that are like scared about investing, for example. So I do a lot of work around like all aspects, like the mindset, managing, saving, and then the investing and the growing part. But you know, usually what people do, and how I started, was with very small amounts, right? So I might have invested like $10, $20. Ultimately, though, that's never going to make someone rich and wealthy and create financial freedom. So eventually you have to build up to the bigger amounts. So I think that, you know, it's about like the way you think about it. Like cutting out lattes or avocado toast is not going to make you rich. So working on like investing in your education around finance, working on your risk tolerance, working on understanding, like, for example, how investing works, working, like you say, on your identity and your ability to, like, for your nervous system to hold more money, thinking about how you can make more money in a more smart way, like that. Those are the things that are going to make you wealthy. I think that we live in a society that unfortunately conditions us in all sorts of like messed up ways when it comes to money. And I remember, I think it was, I don't know if it was in COVID or just after COVID, the Wall Street Journal. So I used to subscribe to the Wall Street Journal. They got in trouble because they did an article that was like, if you're poor and you're struggling, have you tried just like not eating like 3 times a day? Try eating 2 times a day. Yeah, true story.
What?
True story. I know. And I unsubscribed because, you know, I think, again, depending on who you are, yeah, it was so messed up. There is definitely structural and like cultural and societal things that, you know, if someone's come up through poverty and they always grew up in poverty and they didn't have many opportunities and chances and things like this, like, you know, that those are our barriers that we have to acknowledge. It's not all about like, oh, just try harder and work harder. Yeah. That's not true for everybody. For a lot of people it is. Like, for me, like I am like very privileged, and I acknowledge that, and I had lots of opportunities in life. And you know, for us it's a different story, but you know, I think we have to acknowledge those. And so that kind of advice is just an example of the shit, like, shaming money stuff that is out there. And it's like, especially for women, it's like, oh, you're just spenders and you're frivolous spenders, and it's because you're buying shoes. It's like, actually no, it's because I was never, you know, we've been shut out of financial education like for like we're the first generation of women to ever not only be able to earn as much as we can, but to ever have our own bank account. to have
Yeah. It's
like,
insane
as
as well, isn't it?
yeah. So we're kind of like have been the blind leading the blind, and we've also got this generational trauma of like you're not good enough or capable of handling large amounts of money. So
Yeah.
it's just another, and you probably wouldn't find that kind of narrative in male focused media.
No,
It's probably always
100%.
like, stop going out and having lattes with your girlfriends. It's like, no,
Yeah.
you can 100% still do that, and you should do that. You can do both
Yeah.
100%. Yeah.
I love that. Love that. It makes me think of, I don't know if this was also in The Psychology of Money or whether this was in Tony Robbins' Money Mastery, because I read them about the same time. But someone shared that when it came to the stock market and financial advice, that they did a study where a cat had to like put its paw on like one coin or the other, and that the cat was a more accurate, like it got more right choices of the direction the stock market was going than actual professionals, which shows like it's just down to a bit of luck, yeah, a bit of expertise, but a lot of luck, a lot of guessing, a lot of chance. And I was like, so I think they said like the average at-home investor can outperform even the qualified professionals. So yeah, love that.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah,
and something else that I was just thinking of when you were speaking is, especially because we weren't brought up with this, we weren't taught it. It's not in popular culture. Like the magazines that we grew up reading are very different to what is in boys' magazines and stuff like that. Ours is all like, how to get the boy, how to make him love you, all of this. But as a business owner, it is your responsibility to learn about the things that you know that you're not yet knowledgeable in. So I think this is a really, really important conversation. And part of that, I think, like as you touched on, was like investing in your learning. If you know you've got a knowledge gap or a quote unquote weakness, which we all have generationally because our moms and nans and grandmas physically didn't do any of this stuff. So acknowledge to everybody that's listening to this, acknowledge that you're already changing the course of history. So just have a moment. You're doing things that no woman before you has ever had the opportunity to do. So there's that. So not to be, too much, but like, don't fuck it up. Send it to the fucking stars. Like, you've got this responsibility, not just, and this isn't like your bag to carry. This is something of like, you've got a golden opportunity that no woman before you has ever had. So let's do the best that we can do with it. Invest in education. But I think like another really important thing to add in is get around people who know the stuff that you don't know.
Yeah.
Like your network, or actively seeking out groups where people talk about money at all, but also big money, and that's normalized in that conversation, so that it's like that's in your awareness more regularly, if not daily. Like that's been like a really, really big game changer for me. Like I started the business and I was like, I don't know anyone that runs an online business. Nobody talks about money. Nobody travels the world that I know. Like, I'm going to have to build this thing from scratch. And so I've really like seeked out communities or masterminds or group programs where people are going to be openly talking about those things. And like, that's been a really, really big game changer, as well as reading the books, listening to the podcasts, like getting the knowledge. So yeah, I'm going to share a few little things there.
Yeah, you've got to normalize it. I think when I think back to where I was like, 2017, 2018, when this kind of like my kind of breakthrough happened, or like I realized that I had like nothing to show for it, because I was making like multiple six figures a year, and then my income just suddenly like plummeted out of nowhere, and I went from like feeling like I was making all this money, and then I was like, how am I going to pay my rent? And I think back then I just know, like, even though I was making a lot of money, not a single person in my circle said to me, hey, like, are you saving it? Like, hey, are you like investing it? Like, what are you doing with the money? And not that I blame them, but it's like I remember having a conversation with one of my best friends in the UK. She's very successful. She's a judge and a barrister. Like, she's super badass. And she was like mentioning something about paying into her pension, and I was probably like early 30s at this point. I was like, oh yeah, like never even thought about it. And she was like, I said, oh, what pension do you use? And then I remember thinking to myself, I must look at pensions. But of course I never did, because I was like, oh, that's like, that can wait, you know? Because I didn't realize how they worked. I didn't understand compound interest. Like, I just didn't know. So it went to the back of the list, you know? And again, not that I blame people, but I think, wow, like, a lot of people knew I was making like quite significant amounts of money, and no one had that conversation with me, you know?
Likely that they didn't know either, though.
Yeah, well, exactly. Like, you know, that's the thing. Or they, or even if they do, it's just not normalized to talk about that. It's still like money, like we said, money, people would rather talk about sex than money. Like, it, you know, I've talked to my girlfriends about our sex lives a lot, 100 times more than money, like what's in our bank account. And, you know, it's been very interesting to open up those conversations with them. And luckily, I've got, like you say, I've surrounded myself with the right people. Like, I've got a friend who used to be a financial advisor, and we just like nerd out on all of this stuff all of the time. And that, you know, that is what you need. You just need, so true what you say, like, you need to be having these conversations with people, learning from each other, taking responsibility. Like, I'll be honest, when I first started teaching about investing, I got like so nervous, because I was like, oh God, like saying to my mum, like, people are going to invest and then they're going to, what if they lose money and then they like hate me? But I think that actually epitomizes a lot of the problem, because you have to take responsibility, like learn about this for yourself, because no one cares more about your money than you, right? Not even a financial advisor. And unfortunately, there are some like dodgy ones out there. There's ones that, like you mentioned, like they care about their families, they care about their paycheck. There are some great ones out there, don't get me wrong, but you know, even if you do work with a financial advisor, you should understand what's going on, and you should know where they're putting your money, because that's what you know, when people don't, that's when these horror stories happen of like people losing all their money. So yeah, not normalizing it, and that's obviously a big part of my mission, is just normalizing having the conversations and taking responsibility for it.
Yeah, no, super powerful. Whoop whoop! I'm loving this conversation. So juicy. What do you think is another mistake that people can avoid? So let's say they're a few years into business, they've had a reasonably good or like doing well. And when I think of this, I've been inside masterminds where like we openly talked about money, but one of the girls was like similar to you, like a financial investing mentor. And someone shared, like, she just had a really good launch. And I think like a few really good back-to-back successful months. So she shared in the group that she'd got 50K just sat in a bank account. And like, I was like, what? And the financial advisor, or like, you know, financial investing mentor, was like, what? Just because again, she was great at the skill at making money, but just did not know what to do with it. And so yeah, what are either some more mistakes people make, or habits, or things that they can be more aware of on their journey to be able to protect themselves going forwards?
Yeah. I think like people fall into different camps, right? So, you know, a lot of people, they're making good money, but they have nothing to show for it. Like, you know, I had a call with a lady that has a 7-figure business, and she has no savings, no assets, no retirement. So there's definitely like that camp. Like your this lady who had 50K in the bank could have been like, oh yeah, I've just made these huge launches and I've got nothing left over. Then there's like people that have savings, but they are just sat in savings and they don't know what to do with it. I think for people like that, it's really about being intentional with that money, and being very clear on what you're actually trying to achieve. You know, so for example, like, what does she want? Like, does she want to be so this is what I would say to her, like, you know, do you want to retire early? Do you want to buy some properties? Like, investing your money is how you make it grow into wealth, right? No one gets wealthy just from saving because of inflation. So you're always with investing, people invest because they're trying to beat inflation, which is usually about 2% a year. Your money is losing value by 2%. And most savings accounts are giving you less than that. So if it says savings account over the long run, is going to lose money. So when we invest, we're looking to do better than 2%. So that could be in the stock market, property, gold, crypto. Like, I mean, there's so many things. Whiskey. I got a DM about whiskey is actually an incredibly good investment. Like it's historically beat the stock market. So there's lots of things you can invest in. And then again, even with investing, you need to be clear on what you're investing for. Like, is this for your traditional retirement? And by that I mean when you're in your 60s and you don't want to work anymore, or are you actually planning to retire early? Because to be financially free basically just means you're making enough passive income to not have to work anymore, right? That's essentially what retirement is. In the traditional sense, people would work in a 9 to 5 and they pay into a pension or a 401k or whatever it is, and then they live off that money. And what a lot of people don't realize is your pension is mostly invested in the stock market. So that was something that when I found out, really helped me get over my fear of it, because I was like, if the government are literally forcing people to invest into it, it can't be like that crazy. But, you know, so with investing, or do you want to invest so that your money's growing for the next 10 years and then you want to pull it out and buy a property portfolio, like whatever. So you need to be really clear on that. But also with the savings, need to be strategic. So, you know, does she just want that there as a buffer because that's what makes her feel safe? Like, some people only want to have 20k in the bank. Some people only feel safe if they've got 100k. Like, I think that guy that wrote Psychology of Money, he says that, doesn't he? Like, that he actually has a lot in savings, even though, you know, whenever we make decisions, it's always going to be from a logical, like, financial numbers point of view, or it's going to be from an emotional point of view. And obviously 99% of the time it's from emotion. So even though he logically knows his money is more likely to grow in stocks or in property, he's like, I just want that money. So it's, you know, if you're kind of in the camp where you're really good at, like, you're already managing your money well and you're stacking money and you are saving and you're kind of like, I don't know what to do with this, it's just getting clear on what your goals are. And still understanding those, like, basics of financial education of, like, interest rates and compound interest and how you actually create wealth, and, you know, investing in assets and what assets are available to you and which ones suit you. Like, I got invested in the stock market because I didn't want to buy property. Like, I was moving from the UK to Australia. I didn't want to buy a property and then feel responsible. I also had inconsistent income, and I honestly just I felt like I didn't want to commit to a mortgage. You know, and I kind of still don't want to be a landlady. Like, I'm probably going to buy a property in the next couple of years to be diversified, but I don't really want to be honest. So I thought, well, that's it. If I don't want to buy a property, there's nothing out there. So that's how I got into the stock market, because I was like, wait a minute, this is me.
There's a way to be hands off and make money.
Yeah, exactly. It literally is like, it's probably the only thing on the planet that's actually passive.
Yeah.
You know, you don't do anything and at all. Whereas property is a lot. People make it sound, you know, like it's super passive, but it's not really. It can be great, obviously, and it has been great for lots of people. It's just down to you. So it is really that, yeah, it always just comes down to education and knowing, because once you have that, you can make better decisions and you're actually moving forward. But I still think that there's, you know, there is also work around risk tolerance and fear and getting that right balance for you. And if everything's a trade-off. So if that person is like, you know what, I want 50k in the bank because, you know, that's what makes me feel safe, or I want 50k in the bank because I want to be able to drop 10k on a coaching program when it, you know, when it next comes up, or I want to drop like 20k on ads. Like, I saved £10,000 purely to launch an e-commerce business, which failed. But it was like that was the intention behind those savings. And as long as you're happy with the trade-off, like if you know that the money in the bank is not going to be growing and it's likely going to be losing money,
Yeah.
and you're happy with that trade-off, then great. I just want people to know what the trade-off is, and most people don't. They don't realize what they're potentially sacrificing by the actions that they're.
Yeah, no, I really, really love that point, because it's, are you investing in something that has the potential to be an asset, the potential to make you more money? Yes, not everything pays off, and that's the risk that we take. And like you say, your risk tolerance will vary on how many of those more like decisions you make. Like, I have a very high risk tolerance, so I would gladly be like here, there, and everywhere. So I have to kind of think, you know, what do I really want to go for? And like, am I properly behind this decision and all of the rest of it? But anyway, what was I also wanted to add, because when we're talking about things to invest in, also just want to add on to there that like, you are your best investment as well. So whether it's investing in your own professional development, whether it's coaching, mentoring, you know, something that's going to expand what you know, what you're capable of, the level of expertise that you bring into the business, the level that you're able to pass on to your own clients. And so yeah, I wanted to add that on, because especially when I think of like what I've invested in, it'll be smaller, more incremental amounts when it comes to the stock market. And I love seeing those little dividends come back. I'm like, oh, I've been paid back. And like, I reinvest that. But it's nice to see your money make money. You're like, oh, because that's so hands off. I can just like set it and forget it sort of thing. Whereas when it comes to like the coaching business, it'll be much larger amounts in terms of like masterminds and one-to-one coaching and things like that. But also the potential return and the physical returns of that are much, much bigger and have much higher potential in terms of like long-term development.
Yeah.
So yeah, they're all different ways. So yeah, it's about you, what you want to invest in, and I really liked your point about what's actually truly passive income and what's not. Because like in those two examples that I gave, the stock market and it giving me dividends that I can reinvest back in is truly passive, because I don't have to work for that. Whereas a lot of people talk, especially in the coaching industry, will talk about passive income. Girl, that is not passive income.
Yeah.
If you've got to be constantly marketing it, constantly telling new people about it, constantly like raising awareness and building the brand around it, it's not passive. It's very active income.
Yeah.
So there is that like important distinction. So I'm glad you brought that up.
It is true. And I think it's like so much of it is just engaging with this thinking, because we have something called a present bias. Like a lot of the work I do is psychology, because that's my background. And we have this something called present bias, which is where it's like, as a human, it's so hard for us to connect with a future version of ourselves. And that is why so many people don't do this. Like, they don't think forward. And you know, if you want to like invest most of your money back into your business, for example, great, but it's still thinking about what's the plan here. Like, because what happens, there's a really, really great book, can I have a complete brain fart and forget what it's called. The guy in it talks about this concept called closer, not more. And we're all obsessed with like more money, more, without actually thinking about how we're getting closer to the end goal. Because if you kind of invest everything back into your business, and let's say you get your income up to like 300k a year, great, but then what? You know, so if it's like, it's really about working backwards. Like, if you want to get to a point where, and who, like, honestly, like, who doesn't want to get to a point where they don't have to work anymore? Right? Then you're just, and obviously one of the great things about saving money and stacking cash is that you start to run your business from just this place of like groundedness and abundance and like a regulatedness, and you get to have like, you know, and this is something guys are doing all the time. Like, guys are building businesses, selling them, shoving it all in the stock market, never have to work again, and then they're just starting businesses for like the fun of it. And you know, so if you are making that 300k a year, it's like, have you worked out what you would need and where it would need to be to then never have to work again? You know, And then are you like making that happen, or are you just going to be stuck on like a roller coaster of like, or not roller coaster, but like hamster wheel of like, well, I'm making 300k, but then like where is it going? Like what's it doing? Because I think a lot of people they you know, and I've been there, like I've invested a lot in myself, and I used to do that. I was like a bit addicted to it. And I spent a lot of money on coaching programs and coaches and things. Whereas, in retrospect, what I wish I'd done is like balance that out a little bit and been investing alongside that and saving alongside that in other ways, and really working on my goal of being like actually financially free. Because like you said, you still got to work for your business. Like even if it is you've got some recurring revenue, and even if you've got like digital products or things that are more semi-passive, I would say, like you've still got to keep that up, right? And you've still got to like show up. So it's really like just engaging in that forethought is so important, and actually being strategic and like having a plan for it, rather than just like, oh, I'm just blind kind of trying to make more, you know what I mean? Which I think is a lot of people are just like obsessive or like obsessed with 10k a month or 100k a year, and then it's like, when does that stop? You kind of got to stop and take a minute and think about like what are you actually trying to do here,
and changing those habits so that and even if you're the most risk averse person and you make consistent good decisions and you consistently get lucky and all the rest, like that closer versus more, if you're planning for closer, you're still going to be taking logical steps that like genuinely move you forward, rather than just like grabbing onto the next thing. Because like, oh yeah, even if you get lucky, like be putting in the sandbags that are constantly moving you forward, rather than just being just like grabbing things.
Yeah, exactly.
I love this conversation. Thanks, Anna.
Well, right, remind me to answer that in a second. But like, I think, yeah, that's the thing, because making 300k a year, for example, is incredible. But you just got to think about like, what do you want and where is that taking you, and what do you need to do with that money to actually achieve it. And I think that, again, it's identity or it's a knowledge gap, but like we just don't think like that. Like we're kind of just like, oh, this is amazing, making all this money, and we kind of want to reach that next milestone. And actually what a lot of people don't realize is that you wouldn't ever need to make 300k a year to retire a millionaire. So someone who makes like 70k a year, 60k a year, but is like really like manages their money very well, and they invest consistently over the long term, is going to have a better outcome than someone who's making 300k a year and spends it all and doesn't do anything with it. So it's if you kind of sit down and you work it out, and you can do this on your own, or you can have like one-offs with financial advisors if you want, but like if you sit down and work out how much money you need in assets to retire, and then you work out how much you would need to invest over how long to get there, people would probably be quite surprised. Obviously, the earlier you start, the better. But then you're in control, and you have a sense of like, okay, well, then to do that, I would actually need to make 100k a year, and then anything above that is like just great. It's like a cherry on the cake. But you don't need to like necessarily hit 300k unless you want to, which is obviously awesome, and like let's go, let's do it. But that makes sense.
I love that, because they're like, there's two things. I want to try and hold on to both thoughts, which is difficult for me, because there's I'm gonna lose them both now, bloody ADHD.
No.
You can see them just sailing away. Okay, so the first one was around you don't need to make a lot to be able to have a really good like level of lifestyle later on. And I learned that from the book The Millionaire Next Door, that's talking about the study that was done in the US. And I think it was like the 90s, but they studied loads of millionaires. And so infrequently was it the ones living the lavish lifestyles of like, they go to the golf clubs and they drive the nice cars and they live in the big houses. Because quite often they were the ones that had money through generational wealth. It had been passed down to them, and now they were just keeping up with this lifestyle. And actually, they were all either living off credit cards or reliant on like mum and dad having money, or like were just living right to the end of their means for the sake of keeping up appearances. So it was the typical keeping up with the Joneses, and they've got this big fancy house and they drive all the nice cars, but actually there was loads on credit cards, everything was on finance. And like borrowing the membership and all of this. But these were the ones that were like the sales directors, so they felt like they needed to get a nice car to make it look like they were good at their job, or like all of these sort of like, you know, higher up roles within society. So they matched the level of lifestyle that they thought that they needed to show off. Whereas actually the ones who were more like becoming more millionaires and were already more millionaires were people like the cleaners, the guy who drives the van, who lives in the small house at the bottom of the street, who just keeps himself to himself and he does the same job for 40 years, like the bin men and stuff, like people who just live within their means, and everything extra that they'd earned, they'd invested and just put it away. And actually the difference that that made over 20, 30, 40 years skyrocketed far past what the ones living the lavish lifestyle are doing. So I loved that, because like there was such a shift of, you don't want, like the guy that you think is the millionaire next door is not the one you're looking at.
And it's so true. And like I think what's interesting as well is like I'm always so like always observing the narratives we have around money and wealth and everything, and that is another really strong one where it's like, and it's true, it's 100% true. And I always used to be really like intrigued by the stories of people that were like very wealthy, they appeared very wealthy, and then they would go broke overnight. I just think like how can you be making like $1 million a year? Like there was a really good Netflix documentary about a guy that had a huge construction company, making millions a year, living in a mansion, driving like Lamborghinis, like the whole shebang. And then the 2008 financial crisis happened, and with it,
massive empty mansion.
Yeah, like and I wish I need to make a playlist actually for like, because I'm always there's so many good, like if you've not watched The Big Short, for example, like so good, you need to watch it. But he, you know, within a week he was in a trailer park, and it was because he didn't have like he had so much debt, and then when the financial crisis happened, all his creditors wanted the money back. And he, you know, he had to sell everything, and so his net worth was probably like actually zero when you like balanced everything out. But I think that idea is, again, it's like, it is true, but also I personally want to change the narrative, because then I think people think, well, then to be wealthy I have to like drive the shit car, and do you know what I mean? Or they think there's no room for you know, looking and being wealthy, but there is. You know, there is, and you know, there's not one extreme the other. The point is like being strategic about it, and also like doing what you value. Like I still want to drive a Porsche, 100%. I'm going to be getting a Porsche, but I also prioritize things. And like I know, like long time ago, I worked out how much a day of freedom costs me in the future. So I know exactly how much freedom cost me, so I'm always gauging things with that. And once I'm like, you know, I've hit a certain goal in my investments, for example, then I'll be like, you know, well, then I'm going to buy a Porsche or whatever. So you can have both, absolutely. But again, you know, it's about being strategic. But yeah, everything you said is 100% true. It's like probably the guy with like the clapped out old car could be like a multi-millionaire, and you just have no idea.
And that's what's so fascinating about Bali as well, is that like you've got people who are like early in their journey, or coming here to find themselves, or just getting started in entrepreneurship, and you could be on a scooter next to someone that is either a multi-billionaire or a billionaire, but in just like plain clothing. You know, it could be an investor that owns bloody half the island for all we know, and everybody's just driving on the same roads, like next to each other on the scooter. So it's a real like you can't tell who's who. Very interesting.
I know. Shall I just answer this question real quick?
Yeah.
Would you advise investing in the stock market now during this dip? due to Touch Paris. Well, obviously I can't advise anything because I'm not a financial advisor.
And even if there were a financial advisor, it might not be correct anyway. So.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So this is like, which is, I'm glad you said that, because that's my mission, is to do the education side of things. So the way that I would answer this is like, why would people not, and why would people choose to do it, and like what we know historically. Like, if you look at the stock market and all the studies that have been done, the longer you invest for, the better. So someone who invests over like 20, 30, 40 year period for the long term, and they just basically set it and forget it. They pay in regularly and they just don't touch it, has historically done better than someone who's buy, sell, buy, sell, buy, sell. So when I actually had a conversation with someone about this, so very interesting. She had, I don't know how we got talking about it, but she just said to me that she'd sold a lot of her shares, or all of her shares, as the crash started to happen recently. So I was like, oh, like, why did you do that? And it was basically out of fear because the stocks were going down. And so I said to her, like, okay, but do you know that, like, historically, like statistically or financially, however you want to put it, that's like the worst thing you can do? Because what was crazy as well, so we recently had this crash, and then it was going down, and then I think it was last Wednesday, there there was a, so they call it, it's a horrible term, but they call it the dead cat bounce. I don't know, as a big cat lover, I hate it. I don't know why they call it that, but basically the S&P 500 had its like best day since 2008. Yeah. The Nasdaq best day, or its second best day ever. And so what happens is every day your investments are moving a little bit up or a little bit down. And if you miss just like 5 of the good days, the really big days like that, like last Wednesday, you can essentially cut your returns in like half or even less. So the reason that being invested for the long term and never touching it, no matter what the market's doing, is because no one knows what the market's going to do.
Yeah.
Right? But people try and time the market, like, oh, sell now. But like you mentioned, 95% of the experts can't do it either. Yeah. They can't guess. Like, no one knows. Like, it's literally like it. So I recently watched a lecture by what was he called? He's a very famous psychologist, and it's going to annoy me. I'll try and find it and let you know. He's very, very well renowned. I feel embarrassed, can't remember his name. And he said, to get better at something, like to get incrementally better at something, and to be, you know, someone who can, like, you know, for example, you can get better at driving. Like when we all learn to drive, we don't know what we're doing, and then we get better and better, and to the point you're driving with, like, you know, your coffee in your hand and like you're talking on the phone and second nature. He's like, that whatever you're learning has to be like predictable in some way, right? So for example, if you want to get better at sales, that is predictable and measurable, because it's like you can kind of track, like, well, I know that the better I get at like my sales calls, or the more leads that I get, or the better I get at my messaging or whatever. But he said, because the stock market is so unpredictable, you can't by nature actually get good at it. So someone's saying to you, and I'm not claiming, you know, I'm just like saying what he said, but like I found it so fascinating, because he's like, when you have people that are like, yeah, I'm a financial advisor, actually financial advisors don't really do that, but like fund managers or people that invest for you, is actually, yeah, from his point of view, you can't be good at it because it's so random. And there was, I know you said the cat study, there's been studies where they've got monkeys to throw like darts and literally got results. So it's kind of like, so that's why, you know, because no one knows, you can't predict when there's going to be a good day or when there's going to be a bad day. So to kind of average out over the long term, because some years you'll lose, the money will go down, some years it'll go up, some years it'll stay flat. So to get a positive return, you need to be invested over the long run, so that the highs will average out the lows, so that at the end you'll end up on top, right? So
there's a lot of parallels about business here.
Yeah, Yeah, definitely. But when you think with a long-term investor mindset, a lot of people, you know, they're investing. Like for me, for example, I invest no matter what the market's doing, whether it's up, it's down. But actually, a lot of people like to invest more when there's a dip because they see it as like the stock market's on sale, right? Mm. Because if you're buying a stock for like, it's usually around, it costs around $100 a stock, then it dips to like 80, then you buy it for a cheaper amount. Then if it ultimately goes up to 200, you're growing more. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
it's a very complex like topic actually for Instagram Live, but yeah. So I think what really ultimately my answer is like, this is why. And when I had that conversation with the lady that sold everything, and I was like, have you ever taken a course or like have you learned about the stock market? She was like, no. And I was like, you need to, because you need to understand what you're doing, because when you don't, that's when people can lose money and then they blame it and then they scare everyone else, you know. So really about understanding, and then you being able to decide, you know, is it a good idea or not, right? So that's a good answer to that question, which is a good question.
I love that. And yeah, there's so many parallels about business there, like the holding the fort and being steady in the storm for the long run, because yes, you're there for the good times, but you also know that there's going to be rougher seasons. You can't be in a year-long summer. Like, winter's gonna come, there's gonna be challenges that come, you're gonna be up, then you're gonna be down, and that's the way life and business is. But you can prepare for it by having that long-term mindset and long-term strategy, so that you can weather the storm. So, you know, whether it's you've had some great launches or you've had some tougher seasons, but with these better habits, that you're well prepared for that. So that stuff that, you know, business is more of a skill. So I think there can be more of a predictability, that it's not all just potluck like the stock market. So yes, we can improve those skills, but that said, there is stuff that can come out of absolutely nowhere and completely blindside you, that's completely out of your control. Like is it black swan events that they call it for our stock market? So those environmental things that you just completely blindside you on some random Tuesday, that those are the things that you can only be so prepared for, because a lot of times, and whether it's a COVID or whether it's, you know, something else that has like never happened before, or not in our generation or in our lifetime. So being good at managing your money, so that if something comes out of the blue that is catastrophic and could wipe you off your feet, that you're prepared for it and can be steady in the storm.
Yeah, and like on the back of that, I just want to say, like, with the stock market, I think this is why education is so important, because, and it's also why taking like a program or a course, like something like more complete, is important, because it's not luck, the stock market. And I think sometimes, like when you hear little bits and pieces, it's like that's what it feels like, because people's emotions do drive the ups and downs, but over the long term, what drives it is the economy and companies growing. So ultimately, when you, for example, if you decide to invest in the stock market and you buy, you know, an index fund, for example, like you invest in UK companies, then it's important, I think, to know the thesis that you're kind of following with that. And like the thesis is, I believe that the UK economy will grow over the long term. So if you invest in in UK stocks for like, or the top 100 UK stocks, which is called the FTSE 100, for the next 30 years, you're like, I'm just going to invest for 30 years. I'm not going to pull it out. I'm not going to play with it. I'm just going to invest regularly. Then your thesis is like, I believe the economy will grow. That's really what you have to ask yourself. So it's not, if you're buying individual stocks and you're buying individual companies, that can be more like luck, because especially if you know what you're doing and you're just doing it because someone told you. But if you're investing in like baskets of stocks, like index funds or like ETFs, then, you know, you're spreading your risk and you're betting more on like, I think this country is, or like, you know, if you invest in, for example, cybersecurity, like I believe that cybersecurity is gonna grow, and over long term it's gonna make me money. So it's understanding again, like that short term thinking is like, oh, my stocks have dropped, like shit, I'm gonna sell. The long term thinking is like, I still believe this will eventually grow over the long term, and we know that, you know, the American stock market, for example, has returned, you know, a positive return like over a 20 period, you know. So again, it's like understanding what it is. So because when I understood actually what it is, I was like, oh, this isn't like gambling, and this isn't like, look, it makes a lot of sense, and it's like one of the biggest ways people have made wealth for generations.
That's reliable.
Well,
I'm loving this juicy conversation.
yeah, it's a big one. It's a big one.
It is, and I feel like we could be talking here on like weeks.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I was just thinking that.
We just bring in some like chapters and segments to go into.
Yeah.
Okay, so to wrap things up, so I'm conscious my battery's going down, but I really, really love this conversation. I'm going to put it on my podcast as well and like tag you, and we'll put all the book recommendations and everything we've talked about today.
Love it.
So wrapping things up, what would you say are like top 2 pieces of advice you would give for female entrepreneurs in 2025 to help them build towards that financial freedom?
I think number 1 would be have like an honest conversation with yourself about your relationship to money. You know, primarily like my work is around the relationship with money, the psychology of it, managing it, and then saving it, and understanding like the core like wealth principles, and having that understanding so that you can go out there and either like further your education around something. Like if you know, decide like you want to build a property empire, then, you know, you can go out and like learn more about that. But have a really honest conversation with yourself about, you know, about your relationship with money, and really be able to see that making money and then keeping it, saving it, and growing it are 2 different things. And even if you're very good at making money, that doesn't, you know, making a lot of money does not equate wealth, basically. Like they're 2 completely different things. So it's like looking at where are you maybe avoiding money, and you know, I guess like rate yourself like on those areas. Like, are you managing your money? Do you have like intimacy with your money? Like, are you regularly putting money away? Are you strategic with that? Because a lot of people, I think, they save a little bit and then they just like dip into it because they just, again, they do it because they should do it, but they don't really have a reason why. And then educate. I mean, I always just say this, I know I sound like a broken record, but it's education plus the coaching of, you know, because we all know that just knowing how to do it. Like, I actually recently changed and like kind of shut down my investing course, and I'm like repackaging it into like going to be like a masterclass or something like that. And the reason why is because I was selling the course. So I have 2 programs, and I noticed that people that bought the investing, because the investing is like self-study, I would catch up with the students, and they're like, yeah, I've just not done anything with it yet. And I was like, whereas like my coaching program, where there's coaching and, you know, like that, you know, structured, and they have me there with them, like they're getting results, like the networking, they're saving 50k for a house, like, and I was like, again, I've always felt this, you know, like, and I don't know about you, but I've taken a lot of self-study courses that I bought shit that I've never even started. And so I think that it's about being aware of that and having your education, but really asking yourself, are you going to implement this, or do you need someone in your corner that's going to like hold you up, you know, because that really is what makes a difference, as you'll know, because you're a coach, you know, like, are you going to sales stuff, or are you going to take a course on sales, or are you actually going to do it? Probably not, because you're going to have the mindset blocks and you're going to have the worries and the fears and stuff, you know.
This is where like, yes, getting a mentor and or getting into a community where people are talking about this, yes, but doing it is such a difference. Because it's like, I guess the same on any niche. If you were wanting to lose weight, you can watch a video on how to do it, but you need to go do it and get around people that are doing it, because it's that building the habit. It's that kind of like loops back nicely to what we were talking about in the beginning, in that like for some people this isn't going to be easy, because it's breaking patterns and it's learning things that people before you have never done before. So like cool opportunity, but also like might be hard or might be uncomfortable or might cause you to have to like reframe some things or some old patterns or some new ways of doing things and all of this. So might take a little bit of like discomfort initially, but for what you're building and that difference between being rich now versus being wealthy later, because you can be rich and broke next year, versus the long-term wealth and like the long-term vision that you've got and building towards that.
Yeah, and just the, you know, for me, the number one thing is the empowerment and the being able to make educated, informed decisions, you know, because it's your money. And I think, you know, this is the problem, is that we're actually about to go through the biggest wealth transfer in history, and most of that, so from the boomers, like our parents' generation, I'm not sure how old you are, I'm nearly 38, so like I'm the old end of the millennial generation. So like
35, so not that far behind.
So like that, and most of that wealth is going to go to women. So when you were saying earlier, yeah, don't fuck up, like, when, you know, the world is a bit of a scary place right now, and it's still not the best place for women. And so we have, like you said, this incredible opportunity, like especially if you're going to inherit. But if you inherit a lot, for example, or you make a lot, it's that sense of paralysis that people have of like, I don't want to fuck this up, I don't want to do the wrong thing with it. And that is just all psychology. It's like, you know, you can't fuck it up. Like you've got to like know what your options are and like continue to hate yourself, and then just trust that you made, you know, like I had a client once who, she was like, she'd sold a property many years ago when she was going through a divorce from like a complete asshole, and she was like, oh, regret, sold it, like why did I sell it, like I could have made money. And I was like, you sold it because you needed to detach from that asshole. Like that was the right thing to do at the time. Like it's fine, you know, you can buy more and properties.
That mental freedom is also priceless.
Exactly. Nothing, your peace and your health and your mental being is like number one. So I think just that is why, you know, it's all well and good to know you should be investing, or know that like you should be paying into your pension, because that's what's going to look after you when you're older. But are you going to do it, or are you going to have those old patterns of like scarcity and fear, or overspending and spending it on the wrong things, and or not like trusting yourself to do that? You know, that's the big thing that is what you really need to work on, like beyond the how-tos and whatnot.
Yeah, I have freaking loved this.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. Great question.
For coming. I know like we've sort of been in each other's circles for a while now, but like I'm really glad that we've like collaborated now. And yeah, I absolutely love this conversation. I feel like we're bound to have far more in the future, because this is such a juicy topic and it's never gonna not be important. And to finish on that note of like, I think that there's so many more women coming into business, so many more women choosing to go their own way, whatever that looks like. And the fact of this wealth shift as well, with it coming more into the hands of women. I think there's so much possibility, potential. And I'm just going to say it. We could just rewrite the world, because the world is a hot mess right now.
Well,
and that's largely because of men. So we're going to rewrite history, ladies, because we are so much more sentient beings, logical, like emotional, compassionate people. So yeah, I've really, really loved this conversation so much. Thank you. Thank you, Anna.
Well, I'll message you after and we'll get you on. And we can do my podcast as well. So that'll be good. We can talk all things sales, because I know my audience.
Oh, love this. So for everyone watching, thank you for being along live. Travel Business Coach says, this has been amazing. Thank you, guys. We'll post this as a post so that people can watch the replay as well. So if you're live, thank you for coming. And if you're watching the replay, if you want to leave a comment on the post, we're happy to answer it. But yeah, it's been a super, super juicy conversation. So make sure you follow me and Anna if you're not already. But thank you, everyone. And thank you for Anna for coming.
Of course. All right. Speak soon.
Bye. Bye.